I was a teacher with my own classroom for 6 school days. You heard that right. But before you decide this is a story about teaching, let me be clear. This is a story about the belief that our worth comes from how well we perform. See, those 6 days didn't just change my career. They changed how I understand success. It's not about knowing your worth. It's about knowing you're worthy. I've always wanted to be a teacher. If you would have asked 4-year-old Tine what she wants to be when she grows up, she would have said a teacher or a mermaid. But I love teaching. There's nothing better than watching that little bulb light up when someone finally reaches that aha moment. And I was certain that the main value I brought to this world was my ability to teach. But I was about to learn that the way I defined my worth was boxing me into a very narrow version of who I was allowed to be. Most of us are taught, especially in school and at work, that our value comes from performance. Grades, test scores, titles, praise. Without realizing it, we learn a simple equation. Do well equals worth. And when performance disappears, our idea of who we are disappears with it. So when I finally became a high school math teacher, I didn't just see a job. I saw proof that I had worth. But hear me when I tell you that the classroom was not for me. I can explain a math concept in 10 different ways, but I only know one way to say don't talk when someone else is talking. At least, not without adding some colorful language. I had no control over my classroom, and the voice in my head was relentless. Why am I so bad at this? Which didn't make sense because up until then, I had been good at everything that mattered. I took the honors and AP classes. I got the grades, the test scores, the prestigious college, the master's degree. And the whole time, I was living by that simple rule. Do well equals worth. So when I started to struggle, I didn't know what that made me. And when there's a blank in the equation, our brains rush to fill it in. So I filled it in the only way I knew how. Struggle meant less worth. And if I was struggling, then I was the problem. That first week, the stress affected my physical and mental well-being. I lost 7 pounds in 5 days. I was having panic attacks and vomiting. One day on my drive to school, I thought, if I hit that median, I could go to the hospital instead of school. That was when I knew I had to quit, for my own well-being and for my own safety. Quitting teaching was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Not just because I had no financial plan, and not just because I had committed to those kids and to that school. Quitting was hard because I didn't know who I was without that title. If teaching measured my worth, then quitting felt like erasing it. And this isn't just a teacher thing. We do this everywhere. Grades become worth. Test scores, college acceptances, likes, followers, praise, fitting in. We start asking questions like, if I'm not the smart one, the popular one, the successful one, then who am I? When those things disappear, it doesn't just feel like failure. It feels like you disappear. Up until that moment, I had done everything right. So if I couldn't measure up now, what was I even good at? And if I wasn't good, what was I worth? After quitting teaching, I thought that my value had disappeared along with that title. But what I didn't understand was the problem wasn't that I didn't know my worth. It was that I had confused worth, something we measure, with worthiness, something we're born with. But that was about to change. I decided to go to a coding boot camp to become a software engineer. And when I got there, something terrible happened. There were no grades. For the first time, my worth wasn't being measured while I was learning. And without grades or rankings, I had to redefine what success meant. How was I supposed to know I was doing the right things if I couldn't get my A at the end? After 18 years of formal education, I realized I had never learned how to learn for myself. I knew how to perform on demand, but learning to understand, going deeper because I was curious, that was new. And for the first time, my worth wasn't on the line. And my sense of worthiness didn't rise or fall with my performance. Without grades, I had to redefine what success looked like. Success stopped being, how do I compare with everyone else? And became, do I understand this better than I did yesterday? When I started in tech, it would have been easy to feel behind. Some of these folks had been building computers since high school, and I hadn't even started learning how to code till I was damn near 30. But instead of shrinking, I asked myself a different question. What do I bring that isn't measured by experience alone? I brought clarity, communication, the ability to explain complex ideas in human language, things I didn't lose when I stopped being a teacher. Over time, my career grew, my salary grew. One night, I was celebrating with a friend because I had just negotiated a huge salary bump. She said, "Girl, get it." And I said, "Yes." She said, "You are a queen." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Way to know your worth." And I bristled. Was I worth more now than I had been as a teacher making way less money? Was I worth more than I had been in coding boot camp making $0, but finally learning how to learn? Of course not. Because worth was never the right measure. Achieving success isn't about knowing your worth. It's about knowing you're worthy. That's why you will never hear me tell you to know your worth. Your worth was never meant to be measured. You are invaluable, and you are already worthy. Not someday, not when you perform better. You are worthy right now. Psychologists actually have language for this. Contingent worth means your value depends on outcomes. Grades, praise, paychecks. Intrinsic worthiness means your value comes simply because you're human. One rises and falls. The other doesn't disappear when you struggle. And this isn't just philosophical. It has real consequences. Research shows that when our value depends on outcomes, anxiety increases. Anxiety leads to avoidance, and that cycle ends in burnout. And I didn't learn that from a study first. I learned it in my body. I lived what happens when your worth is conditional. So if tying our value to outcomes and performance leads us here, how can we live from intrinsic worthiness instead? Whenever I'm not sure how to live from worthiness, I think about the baggage claim at the airport. If you've never been, here's what it's like. There's a big conveyor belt called a carousel that slowly moves around, and everyone stands waiting for their luggage to come out. When you see your bag, you grab it. You don't hesitate. You don't stand there hoping someone will hand you a random suitcase and say, this one should be good enough. The bag you're waiting for is yours. You packed it. Everything inside already belongs to you. That's what it feels like to claim your life from worthiness. So let's do a quick exercise. I want you to picture your bag, a suitcase, a backpack. Just make sure it has room. And now ask yourself, what does success actually mean to me? Not what gets applause, not what looks impressive online. What do you want your life to feel like? Maybe it's meaningful work. Maybe it's rest without guilt. Maybe it's friendships where you don't have to perform. And yes, maybe it's financial security. Take each one of those things, fold it up, and put it in your bag. Not as something you have to earn, but as something you're allowed to claim. Because when you live from worthiness, you stop asking, am I enough? And you start asking, what do I want? Here's what that shift can look like in real life. A woman I worked with, let's call her Nicole, came to one of my talks after getting a promotion that looked great on paper. But instead of asking, did they offer me enough? She asked a different question. Do I believe I'm allowed to ask for more? That question led her to realize that her skills had outgrown the role in general. Nicole applied elsewhere and went from making $98,000 to $198,000. And for those of you who haven't been a math teacher for 6 whole school days like I have, that means she more than doubled her salary. But here's the important part. The money didn't create her worth. Her worthiness came first. And whether the outcome is a raise, a new opportunity, or the courage to choose a different path, the pattern is the same. When you stop measuring your worth, you start making decisions that honor your worthiness. Imagine what could be possible if an entire generation grew up knowing that they're worthy. If grades didn't define intelligence, if test scores didn't define potential, if titles, followers, likes, paychecks didn't determine whether someone mattered. When people believe that they're worthy, they make decisions based on curiosity instead of fear. They take risks without worrying that failure defines them. They build relationships without keeping score. Imagine what's possible if we stop tolerating inequity because we know deeply and collectively that we are all inherently worthy. When we stop measuring human value and start protecting human dignity. When worthiness becomes the foundation, not the reward. But to get there, each of us needs to take the first step. So when you leave here today, I want you to think about your bag. And before you go to bed tonight, set aside some time to decide what belongs in it. Your version of success. Fold those things in carefully, lovingly. Because when you live from worthiness, you stop chasing and you start becoming. When you live your life from worthiness instead of performance, everything in that bag is already yours. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to prove it. You just have to claim it.